Are you holding back on your ideas, your decisions, your contributions, waiting for somebody to give you the green light? Here's the truth: influence isn't handed to you, you have to earn it. Today, we're going to talk about how you can stop waiting for permission and start leading with confidence. Welcome to How to Get What You Want. This podcast is for driven women ready to claim their goals and navigate their careers with clarity and confidence. Join me as we explore real stories, tools, and strategies to help you steer your career exactly where you want to go. Let's get started on helping you get what you want. Welcome. I am so excited that you're here with me today. I think this topic is important in every aspect of our lives. We're talking about influence. And it's this thing that is something that it's not tangible. It's not something we can demand. We can't just say, listen, trust me, follow me, believe me. It is building influence is something you do through your actions, building trust, spending time building relationships. And here's the myth: we believe that our hard work in especially a corporate environment will be noticed and recognized and rewarded, and that things get done based on our title. But influence is not about the title. It can be when you understand your influence and you hone that at the right level that you're at. You can have a title and influence. They don't have to go together. Influence is something that we can't control, but it comes to us. And we need to be an observer of our environment. Who holds influence in the organization? These are some of the things I want you to think about. Do you hold influence? What are the questions people ask you? Do they trust you? Do they confide in you? Do you hold that trust in a way that honors that truth that they told you that they needed to get some advice on? The Center for Creative Leadership did some research and they looked at when people hold influence, they have power in an organization. They're the ones that get things done. They step into leadership roles because they take initiative, because they're kind of playing the part above their kind of current title. They're taking initiative. I had a senior person who's a friend of mine. We were talking about what he tells his mentees, and he tells his mentees, think beyond your job description. Think about what value you can provide. When you do that and you're proactive, people notice you. You're solving problems beyond what's important to you. Building influence is about recognizing that your peer needs some help with something and you say, hey, let me take that for you. Let me do the deck. Let me lead the project. This leader said, I wish more people would just take initiative. It's like they're waiting for somebody to give them permission. And he goes, and if they came to me, I would say, yes, please do it. And what he said was, people's optics are based on where they sit in the organization. He goes, I don't know what to tell you, how to look beyond for the value that you bring, because your optics in the organization are unique to you. He doesn't know how to tell some of the people within his organization how to do their job or go beyond in their job because he's just not close enough to it. So take initiative, think outside of that. That builds influence, helping others. It's the way that people are understood, their value in the organization, and it will reap benefits for you in the longer term because the right people will know you. As you go up in the organization and as your influence grows, your influence is not always directly related to those actions that you do. Your influence grows from what people say about you. When you go above and beyond, somebody might mention to somebody else, hey, Susie had helped me with this deck, or she made this introduction for me. Those actions help other people understand that you are somebody that that can be trusted. And so your influence grows without you even being in the room as more and more people know the impact that you create. So influence is something not only to think about building and who holds it, but it's something to really respect because it is out of your control. But if you do the right things, you build it and it capitalizes its interest on itself by doing that. And it starts by really owning your voice, who you are, and thinking proactively, not only what can I do outside of my job description, like he said, but how can I be helpful to somebody else? Even thinking about in a meeting when somebody asks a question, answering the question so that you show that you're engaged with them and you're supporting them. That's building influence. Other people see that you support others. Influence is such an interesting conversation, and it's not something that is simple to understand because it grows with our direct actions, but it also grows as people get to know what you do and the influence you have and kind of the stories and the legacy that you leave every single day. So I always tell people show up because you never know what lands with somebody else and something they can share, and that's growing your influence. I'll share a few stories about this, and I want you to be thinking about what is your influence today and what do you need to do to maximize those results. Hey, Susie here. Thought I'd pop in. I wanted to let you know I've been an executive coach for over a decade. I work with executives and they call me their silent partner because I help them increase their confidence when they're facing really difficult decisions. If you'd like to see if we're a good fit, head over to SusieTalmanchuk.com and fill out an application. I'd love to hear from you. So one of my clients was wanting to be intentional about building her influence. And so we talked about a couple ways to do that. And I first said to her, how do you know you don't have influence? And it was really obvious. People saw her as the person that owned the Salesforce implementation, but her job was so much more that she did. Her name is Lindsay. And she knew that because when she would get in front of senior leaders, they would always ask her about something specific to that tool instead of looking at her as a leader that was leading an entire part of the organization. Her ability to help people understand the value that she brought was an indication that her voice wasn't being heard, her influence was not seen. She was doing the hard work, showing up every day and really investing in the people that worked for her, but she wasn't spending any time getting to know her colleagues and thinking about senior management because she felt like that wasn't her role to spend time in. And it really had a direct result on her because those decision makers about her, when her boss went and was trying to fight for her, they didn't optically see that her area of influence was bigger and broader than they believed because they only saw this small little part. So we started talking about what can she do in meetings where those people, she did identify the decision makers and she didn't set a one-on-one meeting with them, but she made sure that when she did participate in meetings with them, what are the questions she was going to ask? What comments was she going to make? She wasn't going to make it about that small area of the business that she represented. She was going to start talking a little bit more about her leadership, some of the projects that her team was leading. She was expanding their optics of what her area of responsibility was, which increased her influence because they understood that she contributed a lot more. They saw her in a different light. She didn't try to just go to them and say, hey, listen, I wanted to make sure that you understood that I have a lot more responsibility than you believe. And I'm just going to tell you, here are the 5 areas that I oversee. She was a lot more strategic about it. And when she would meet with them one-on-one, those people that she identified as she started to think about this strategy, she made sure that the small talk was around the excitement she had about this project that her and her team were working on, or this something that they were gonna talk about. It was a more strategic, kind of zoomed out view, even if it did come to the tactics of this other smaller part of what she owned in the organization. It was a really great exercise for her to think about who knows her, who needs to know more about what she does. How can her influence help her boss increase their influence? Because When your people have influence, that raises your influence as well. So helping your people understand the influence and how people see them is good for them and good for the overall organization. I was talking to a cohort about this idea of being proactive and reaching out to people and having one-on-ones, having people know who you are, and also understanding what their optics of you are. How do you get feedback? How do you get people to know you? And this one leader was saying it's an interesting looking at the other side. So she's a vice president in an organization, and she said that there was a woman that asked for time on her calendar, and she came and asked good questions, but she would give her advice, and then this person would ask to be on her calendar again and will have done nothing with the advice she gave her. It was like every time she'd meet with her, she just wanted to have FaceTime with her, but because she didn't do anything, she was losing influence with this VP. Instead of in her mind, she was thinking, "Oh, I'm doing such a good job. I'm making sure I get FaceTime." Well, if you don't follow up, if you don't do what you say you're gonna do, if you get advice from somebody, you don't follow up on it, they will lose trust in you, trust in your ability, and you decrease your influence. This woman didn't know. In fact, the evidence that she didn't realize what was going on was that not only did she reach out to this person, but she reached out to her peers at the VP level, and they reported back the same thing and was like, this woman started getting this bad reputation about basically wasting everybody's time for no reason, but she just wanted to get FaceTime. And then the final straw was she went to their boss and got time on her calendar and wasn't smart about how she used that time. And basically, that senior leader, after she met with her, realized that she didn't know what she did in her role. She didn't frame it well to the senior leader about what she wanted her to know about her. She didn't think about when you step through a lot of levels, what is the outcome that you want? This woman ended up getting escorted out of the business over time, and this leader that told me this was saying it was because she didn't use her influence smartly. She was doing what, they might say in books, get FaceTime with the leaders, help them know who you are, but she wasn't building the relationship. She wasn't building the trust. She wasn't thinking about the other person on the other side of the table and what's important to them. If they tell you to follow up on this or try this or give you advice, gosh, you better do that. And if you aren't able to do it, circle back and tell them, hey, listen, I know you gave me this advice. I haven't done it yet because, or I'm working on this. You told me this, and this is what I understood. Is that correct? Is that right? If you're building your influence, you have to be respectful of the other side. And that was, even though it might be what they show you on a map, people would say, build your influence by connecting with people. You have to do it in a really meaningful way. Let's talk some tips. I want you to think about as I go through these, how are you going to apply this for you to build your influence, whether you're starting from nothing, maybe you're newer to an organization or you've never really thought about this before? What can you do? So the first tip is to start in a low stakes situation. In regular meetings that you go into, maybe you want to do this as a prep. What question can you ask that's meaningful? In the moment when you see somebody asks for a to do, who could do this for us? Volunteer. Show that you take initiative. Show that you'll follow up. Don't just take it and not do it. But what can you do in a way that is going to make you stand out? Take something from somebody else so they don't have to do it. And maybe it's something that is not within your professional environment. Maybe it's something that is in another place in your life. Maybe you volunteer with an organization, but you want to build your influence so you can be more of a decision maker. You can build the relationships of the people around you. The best way to do that is to take on something more for them. What can you do to serve them? And maybe it is even in a meeting, making somebody's point or making a comment about somebody's point. Oh, I loved how you said that. Or after a meeting, your contribution there was really thoughtful and I really appreciated that. thank you for offering that. Making those connections with people and making them feel good or reiterating or supporting them is a way to build one-on-one influence. And other people notice that when you're doing that for others. So the first tip is to start in low stake situations. How can you just show up in a way that people are noticing you? So the second tip is to think about your contribution. What can you add to any situation? What advice can you give? What can you lead? If somebody isn't taking initiative, how can you take initiative? Especially as you go up in an organization and you're really smart about where you can have the broadest impact. If you know you can handle it, take on a big project that has optics that are beyond your area of the business. When you have to collaborate with others, when you're a part of something that goes beyond just your direct team, that builds influence with people because you're working with them and building the trust. You're showing them who you are. You're showing that even having fun working with people. People like to work with people they know, like, and trust. And likability is really important. People may just invite you as to start out with because they like being around you. You make them feel good. So, what can you do to contribute to a conversation, contribute to a project, expanding your area of where you're responsible? So, any opportunity to contribute beyond just your organization, that's just going to give you more connections to people. And if you show up in the right way, that's going to build your influence because more people are going to know you. And then the third tip is to create visibility around your contributions, AKA, how are you advocating for yourself? And this doesn't have to be self serving. Hey, I'm going to tell you all about the list of things that make me an amazing contributor, amazing human. It's about when a project's done, saying at the right time, maybe it's to your boss, maybe it's in a meeting, saying something like, I'm really excited that the team was able to pull out that project. Do you know that just with the operational efficiencies that we gained, we are able to take 5 more calls? I'm super excited about that. Now, you're tying your contribution to the output of the company, but how do you do it and frame it in a way that doesn't sound like you're just being boastful to be boastful? If you do it in a way that celebrates that contribution, or you want to make sure they know, especially to your boss, you should be showing them how do you do this and framing that in a way that benefits the other person. Ask yourself, why do they care? And then think about how do you want to frame that to them. And when you create that visibility, the first few times it takes some preparation to write down how you're going to frame it and then say it in a way that you start feeling comfortable with it. And then over time, you learn how to do that in a way that is very natural to you. So the 3 tips are, how do you try to build influence in small ways, in low stake situations? How do you ask good questions, support others? The second is, how do you add to? How do you contribute more? How do you expand your influence beyond what you do in your day-to-day role? And then the third thing is, how do you create visibility around those things that you do? How do you advocate for you and your team? Those are ways for people to understand your influence and that you're more proactive about it. Building your influence is something that is imperative as you are in an organization, as you go up in an organization. And if you want to create impact, it's all about focusing on building your influence. So, as an executive coach, I am going to challenge you to really think about, what do you need to do differently? Are you waiting for permission? Are you waiting for somebody to tell you it's okay to do something? Be an observer of yourself in the next couple weeks and think about, are you more passive? Should you ask for more? Should you just start doing? How can you add to your contribution? Be an observer of when people are asking you questions, they're coming to you for things. Are people trusting that you can be a confidant for them? Those are all signs of influence. And understanding if you have it is a good way to know if you can maximize it or if you can start to grow it. So think about, where are you holding back because you're waiting for permission? And what's one step that you can take to increase your influence? Maybe it's with an individual, maybe it's in a meeting, maybe it's even just turning on your camera and making a connection with somebody and making a comment. It could even be in chat where there's a meeting that's going on and you reach out to somebody and say, "Hey, I really appreciated that comment. I thought that was very well articulated. Great job." So how are you building that influence? Influence is not handed to you. It's something you earn. If you want to know that for yourself and build that for yourself, it takes a lot of just showing up in a good way, in the right way, keeping your promises, doing what you say you're going to do, and being really intentional. And it is making those one on one connections, thinking about who holds influence in the organization, who do you need to know, who needs to know you, and building those relationships. It might be you ask for time and do one on one, but ask them about their leadership or how they got where they are. Ask them really insightful questions and don't make it just about you. Go with the idea of being curious and making a connection. And thinking about this will give you the opportunities when you're early to a meeting and somebody that holds a lot of influence is there that you don't know well. If you're ready for it and you're thoughtful about it, those questions or that way to connect with that person will just come to you. So once you unlock the optics around influence and think about how are you being proactive around it, you will start naturally making those connections and building that influence. And like I told you before, it's really important because as you go up in an organization, it's the way things get done. And your influence, if you show up consistently, people will start talking about that and you'll build influence even without being in the room. Influence is something that you should think about it as currency. If you have it, if you don't, if you've lost it, if you need to gain it, what's the evidence that you have it? And how are you going to keep building it? Influence is so important in a negotiation because the relationship is so important to, can you get what you need from the other person? So if you don't have relationship equity when you walk into a negotiation with somebody, how are you going to build it quickly? How are you going to make that connection? How are you going to build that influence with them? I would love to know, what are your pieces of advice that you give to others, and how are you building your influence? What are you going to do? How are you going to take action? What are you going to stop? What are you going to start? I'm so happy that you are here today. If there's somebody that you know needs to build their influence, share this with them. Help them to think about the way they can start building that for them. And never forget that negotiation is more than a skill, it's a mindset. Until next time.